Hello and welcome to the show. For this week's Canyon Rally, I have gone for some little bit more obscure rally cars. Although you might be sitting there wondering how on earth does a Sunburst count as an obscure rally car? Well, there are many variants of this, and it does make for a normally very sensible rally vehicle. However, this one is electric. This is the first electric car that I have driven on Beam. I've seen there are various mods around for different vehicles to give them electric power. However, yeah, this is the first one that I've played around with, and seeing as it all came into a nice sort of rally spec vehicle was certainly curious to see how it would manage. It's got decent enough acceleration up towards turn 1. You know, the plus side of electric motors, you get all of your torque instantly, but there's not quite the crazy level. Certainly after last week with some of the ludicrously powerful cars there, this hasn't quite got that crazy level of acceleration, but it's still not too shabby. I certainly wasn't quite expecting it to be doing sort of 75, 76 miles an hour as we left the bridge jump, and that got me in a little bit of trouble on this opening run. Couldn't quite slow the car down in time. It is a rather sedate 20 mile an hour bump into the barriers at the end of all of that. For an accident at the landing of the bridge jump, that is very, very tame indeed. Now, one of the most common and easiest mistakes to make on this course, locking the brakes into that second corner, or more precisely locking the rear brakes into that corner. I just couldn't quite get the car slowed down, and the back end started to come round, and then we smacked the wall. And this vehicle's wheels are rather delicate. They do kind of get bent quite easy. I mean, that was a fairly hefty whack on the barrier that snapped the steering. I didn't quite realise. I went to get on the power sort of out of the corner, didn't realise we were pulling so badly to the left, and well, it's in a little bit of a predicament. The Sunburst there is, not having the best of times. Also, not a good idea to try and run it close to the wall where you're not quite got your judgment right. That's the entire right-hand side of the car gone. You don't want to be too far to the left on that section. You can see pretty much where we've landed. There is a little bit of a bump for the takeoff of the bridge jump, as you're not quite where you want to be. And I tried to avoid it going the other side. This is what happens when you do run over that slightly extra bump bit. It is just a lot more vicious on the landing. Some cars can get away with it, others not quite so much, and this time we lose the whole left-hand side of the car. There's a little bit of a nasty section, and you have to be careful as well if you don't have huge amounts of grip. Trying to change, you're doing 60, 70 miles an hour. If you try to too quickly change direction around there, you can lose the back end of some of these cars. So, a couple of little errors. In all honesty, it wasn't too difficult to get this car down the canyon. It is a relatively simple car to drive, in all honesty. You've got to really make sure you do get it slowed down into this first corner. It's not the most powerful of brakes going on in here, and as you saw earlier, very easy to lock something up and have an issue into the barriers around there. But once you've got it through that section, we can then run pretty decent speed up towards the jump. Do have to go on the brakes a little bit. It's all about trying to get that nice landing. This hasn't got good enough. It's decent rally suspension, but it's certainly nowhere near good enough to take that flat out, just because it's going to be too bigger a shock on the landing. Very few vehicles can actually get away carrying sort of very, very high speed across that jump. As we now come across the dirt section, no issues whatsoever, as you would expect really from the Sunburst here. Again, it's on the brakes, and it's a little bit of an awkward one to get it slowed down. Do get it slowed down for the cave hairpin, inadvertently really throwing the car through that corner. There's a slight lock of the rear brakes at the very last moment. Ended up kind of helping me getting it around the corner. We now accelerate away down towards these fast final corners. It's only 105 miles an hour though that it gets up to, and it certainly is lacking a little bit of speed compared to some of its competition down here as we weave our way through this section and run towards the finish line. It is again 102 miles an hour across the finish line, and on the brakes we go, and everything's locked and we're going to go sideways, but it is under control. And a kind of relatively composed run. You would expect that though from a rally car, really. With the electric power, it was a bit different to drive, in all honesty. While they might have all the torque instantly, there's just not the torque there that we've had from a fair few cars, but certainly not a bad vehicle to drive down this course. Up next, we have got a real beast of a rally vehicle. This is the Baja Vance. Now, the H15 Vanster that I drove quite a while ago, actually, down this course, was a surprisingly quick vehicle, and I thought that this might stand a chance of setting an even more impressive time. There is more power, and I believe even more heavy-duty suspension going on in this. So, yeah, I was expecting great things from this, and certainly we've got good acceleration up towards turn 1, although slowing it down is a little bit on the scary side, and yeah, there's a lot of speed going on in the Baja, and it's getting it slowed down again that is on the rather tricky side. That is very much impaled on the fence. Now, the Vance, as I said, was one of the few vehicles that could take this jump flat out. The Baja version is even faster, which means taking it flat out, while the suspension can physically handle it, you then do have to be very, very aware that getting it then slowed down at the other end is quite difficult. So, yeah, probably not the best idea. Also, carrying too much speed through turn 1 is not a good idea at all. That is a lot of rolls from the vehicle as it eventually gets caught up on the crash barrier and not quite deposited off into the canyon. Very much saved by the crash barrier on that one. The door's already hanging off. I'm not sure what on earth I did on this one to have the door hanging off already. Trying to get it slowed down for this corner was a little bit of a tough one, and then you've got the bumps that you catch them wrong. This has got such a high centre of mass. You know, the suspension is designed for carrying very high speed across deserts and that sort of terrain that, yeah, when things go wrong, it is very easy for this thing to topple over. The bumps down this back section, almost catching it out. Amazingly, I got it back under control before it went for a huge roll. That section has launched loads of cars into huge rolls into the air and so on. Did get away with it, although you see, yeah, that snapped up one of the front wheels. Certainly plenty to be wary of as again we go for perhaps a slightly less spectacular roll, that one, just running a little bit wide. We clipped the bank and it was enough to bounce the van around and to see it onto its roof. So, yeah, got to be aware of rolling over, and certainly that's one of the big differences between this and the sort of the normal Vanster. This has got more power, I have no doubt, and is a faster accelerating and faster in a straight line. However, the sort of extreme off-road suspension is actually working against it a little bit on a course like this one. Got to be so wary of rolling the vehicle, and the suspension I think is just a bit too soft for this sort of a course. It does kind of bounce around, it does wallow around a little bit in these tarmac corners. You know, you would expect that from a vehicle like this one. A lovely smooth landing on the bridge jump we get. Really got to make sure you get the van slowed down, and you can't throw it through this corner with as much speed as you might ideally like to because of the bumps. Yeah, while, you know, this is a mostly tarmac course, and, you know, race cars can survive that sort of corner, the bumps are enough to launch this onto its side. You saw what happens if you try and turn in with too much speed. It is very, very top heavy, and yeah, bad things are going to happen. Likewise, you can't really clip the inside of this corner. Not a good idea to go near the dirt there. You will see the van roll over. You can clip it on the exit, that's absolutely fine, but sort of mid-corner, you just don't want to go near it. There's no point in risking rolling the vehicle. As we run down this back straight, 107 miles an hour, no problem hitting the bump on the outside. The suspension more than capable of dealing with that one. It doesn't actually launch the van up onto its side. As we now head through these fast final corners, it's just about in control, but again you see the van wanting to lift up, and it's on its roof across, or on its side across the line at 100 miles an hour. I think I just dipped a wheel into the inside ditch, and that was all it took to lift it up and, well, yeah, take it for a tumble. So we rolled it across the line, which is always something good generally in FailRace videos. It was kind of after the finish that it crashed. And finally, perhaps the most bizarre of all of them, the Lamborghini Countach. Now, I did run the Countach a little while ago through this course. There is, though, a proper rally spec for the car, so it's all-wheel drive, and it is a bit more ride height. I think it's got sort of rally suspension going on the vehicle. It looks quite odd, certainly when you see it from the side in this guise. However, Was interested to see how this one would manage as well. It's almost up towards 100 miles an hour as we take the crest of the first corner. We land that no problems, although trying to get it slowed down again, very, very similar story to the van. Couldn't quite get it slowed down into that first corner, and surprisingly, car's still working after that heavy. Well, I say working. I use working quite loosely in in that one. Yeah, it is. It's not the twin turbo version, the rally spec car, so it hasn't quite got the same power as the sort of normal Countach that I drove down here before. Still, though, plenty of acceleration and enough power to get you into trouble. That's across the dirt section. We get the Countach. You kind of get a wheel stuck on the dirt, and at some point it manages to bend one of the rear wheels slightly out of alignment, and you can't always get the cars off the dirt that easily when you are going at speed. Yeah, it is a pretty sorry state. Amazingly, still actually drives. Somehow in all of that, I could actually get it in reverse and could still get the car to drive, despite it being that twisted up. Again, managed to have a door flapping around, and I'm not quite sure how, although we're going to have a lot more problems than a loose door when we, run the wrong side of the bridge jump, launch the car kind of sideways off the jump, and that's never, ever going to end well for anybody. And once more, we have a very, very poorly looking Lamborghini in this one. However, once more, the Lamborghini is still actually working, just about working. Again, this is a very just about working. Somehow we've still got some drive going on to the front wheels. I think the diff is playing funny buggers with us, but it does kind of just about claw its way along the floor. Considering the state the car is in, it's missing a rear wheel and the front wheels are literally just flapping around loosely. I wasn't expecting it to be moving whatsoever. Now, we saw the Baja Vance was okay with hitting that bump. The Countach, not so much. Countach, not so much. Admittedly, it is going a bit faster, and, there's certainly not the ride height going on, and that is a vicious roll from the car. That's an awful lot of rolls on. Again, the car is actually still functioning. If that had landed on its wheels, that would still drive. And while it looks horrendous, that was actually not a huge amount of damage for the car, all things considered. There's also a bump coming towards the bridge that you don't want to hit. Again, hit it with the speed that you're going in the Lamborghini, and you're going to have some trouble. And then there is a small bit of fire, in fact, quite a large bit of fire now going on at the back of the car. Yeah, the bump. I'm kind of trying to take a tight line coming onto the bridge, but as I'm trying to take that, I find myself playing a little bit more risky with that inside bump, and as ever, getting cars slowed down for this corner. It's such a bumpy brake. It's such a horrible bumpy braking zone to try and get cars slowed for. That is such an easy mistake to make. Might not have hit the bump with quite as much speed this time. Almost get away with saving it through the first part, but just ever so slightly overcorrect it into the next, and you are carrying a lot of speed down that section, and yeah, trying to regain all of that is not necessarily that easy. Once more, we're up to 116 miles an hour, but we lose the back end ever so slightly. That forces us across the bump, and once more, we've got a Lamborghini launched into a tumble, although not in the worst condition. We have seen the car, and it is, again, still working. Now, the Countach was proving to be incredibly strong in all of these. These are some high speed. That's 116 miles an hour that we smack the bump and flip the car, and it is still working, although couldn't quite find its way up that hillside, and then we met a rock. Not sure if the wheel snapped after sort of messing about with it trying to climb the hill, or whether that snapped in the crash, because I did have surprisingly good steering up until that moment. We did snap the front wheel in the end. However, we did get a clean run with the Countach again. This vehicle wasn't too bad to drive down here. You did have to be aware the brakes, again, weren't particularly amazing on this car. It wasn't particularly good at getting slowed down. After the drag car that I had last time, that was absolutely phenomenal. It might have cooked its brakes just before we came to the finish line, but that thing was really very good at getting slowed down. Today's cars have just not quite had the braking power, really. Got to be very, very careful with them. I was a little bit slow coming off the end of the bridge jump. Just about got away with it. You can kind of get away with being a little bit slower, provided you are still going fast enough to make a smooth landing, because the time you're going to lose by braking that bit earlier on the bridge, you're going to make up by having that neater landing and be able to put the power down much sooner, rather than fighting the car around. Across the dirt section, did have to have a little bit in the way of a lift. Couldn't quite be flat out through that. Again, we're on the brakes into the tunnel hairpin, although not getting up to amazing speeds beforehand, and you're still relatively early on the brakes in this car. Now this section, Lamborghini relatively happy with taking down. Here we can get it up to a fairly respectable 118 miles an hour. Still managed to hit the bump unintentionally, however, didn't have a massive flip. It is very bouncy though through the first of these higher speed corners, and then neatly does it through the next, and we get a big slide. Just about managed to fight the car for control. It's across the line, and we go for a flip and a twist, and just about managed to miss the tree. And the Lamborghini's still working. After all of that, almost go for a secondary roll as well. Yeah, the back end of this car is not the most planted thing in the world, and letting go at those, I say high-speed corners, the high speed for this course, you're doing, 80, 90 miles an hour around there, and losing the back end is not particularly fun. We've managed to have two cars roll their way across the finish line in one episode. Both of them, Lamborghini does work. The Vanster, I have no doubt, would work if it landed on its wheels. It's not the healthiest looking Countach, I'll be honest, but it does still drive, and amazingly, sort of the alignment and so on wasn't completely and utterly buckled from all of that one. So a rather unusual rally car this. However, it did make it down the course eventually. So it is on to the times, and everything today was all relatively close. The Countach, the fastest of the lot, perhaps unsurprisingly, at 139.3, puts it into 29th place. Interestingly, it's about 3 seconds down on the normal Countach that went down here. As I said, the rally version didn't have the twin turbocharger, so it wasn't quite as powerful as crazy acceleration-wise, although I'm surprised to see that amount of gap. You would expect the rally one to be better suited to a course like this, but that just wasn't the case. The electric Sunburst, a 140.6, just over a second down on that Countach, goes into 32nd place, beats the Mercedes E420. It is a little bit slower than the H15 Vance, a bit slower than the Night Snake. Interestingly, and this wasn't a result I was expecting, the Baja Vance into 34th place, a 141.5, is actually slower than the normal Vance by about a second and a half. And I think the difficulty is the Baja one, while yes, it is a quicker vehicle, it is a quicker accelerating, higher top speed, the suspension is a lot more set up for really extreme off-road, sand dunes and so on, and on a course like this, it is just not able to carry the corner speed. It's just not comfortable and far too easy to roll over. However, that is going to be it for this video, guys. As ever, I will put links to all of the mods I've used in the description so you can download them, have a go with them yourself. But that'll be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.